online. Successfully delivered, I would say, the new Global Azure Bootcamp 2019. And I'm sitting here with a few guys, some new, some old faces. And we delivered 5 sessions today, and we will talk a little bit about that. We will do some recap about the sessions for the day. So please introduce yourself.
Firas, Microsoft MVP. I'm the new face here, I think. So I was here to talk about Azure Active Directory and the integration with Microsoft Graph. So I hope it was good, and we got a lot of positive feedback and constructive feedback. And
we will come on that later. Where are you from?
I'm from Tunisia, and I worked in Paris.
Cool.
For a consultancy firm called SWAT.
So thank you for coming here.
Thank you for inviting me.
The next one.
Thank you, Damir, for the invite. My name is Ricardo Machado. I'm Portuguese. I'm an architect in Microsoft services, and my session was about Azure adoption in large organizations and what services Microsoft is building in Azure that help organizations deal with the scale of Azure.
Oh, sounds interesting and confusing. We'll talk about
I hope not.
Boris?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me also. My name is Boris. I work as a consultant for ThinkTexture, and today I had a slightly advanced Azure function session where we talked about hosting options and custom bindings and security and all those things that come up when you talk to people that have a little bit of function knowledge.
Oh, it was interesting. Indraneel?
Hello, my name is Indraneel Poole. I am working as a software developer with Mdimagh. I'm also the co-organizer of Azure Meetup Frankfurt. And today's my topic was Machine Learning Studio, Azure Machine Learning Studio, as introduction with a use case for predictive maintenance.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, I'm Damir Dobric, Microsoft Regional Director working for Mdimagh and Azure MVP. So let's come to you. Azure Active Directory and Microsoft Graph. What is the first and what is the second? What is different?
In fact, there are 2 services, and there are the Azure AD service, so almost everyone knows about that. And there is the new thing called Microsoft Graph, which is the successor of the Azure AD Graph. So we don't use Azure AD Graph API anymore.
Just a moment. When you say new, what does it mean? In the context of Azure, new might be 2 days or 2 weeks.
Let's say it's 1 year work from Microsoft, and we have a lot of work in progress. So we have a lot of updates. So almost every week, every month, we have new features. And now Microsoft is working on Microsoft Graph API because, in fact, it's the entry point for almost all the APIs and services for Microsoft. So now we're talking about the Microsoft 365, which includes many services, and the entry point for all the services is Microsoft Graph API.
So when you say, I didn't get that, why I as a developer should use the Graph? You say it's entry point for all services. Is it entry point for Service Bus, for IoT Hub, or Office 365 services specifically?
Let's say it's the entry point for managing. So managing users, applications, roles, groups, etc. So Microsoft 365 includes Office 365, for example, and includes also Azure Active Directory. So managing users, managing applications, managing access to those applications. So all of this is done by using Microsoft Graph API on the developer side, or less. So we're talking about code, we're talking about applications. Yeah.
So that's interesting. That means if I have application and users and roles behind them, I could leverage this API, consume this Graph API to build up this graph.
Exactly. Today, I can develop an application, web application, like Outlook.com, for example, or like Office 365. So where we can list all the emails, when we can have all the information about my company, about my users, about my group, about my calendar, etc. almost everything.
And this is also done by using of graphic.
Exactly.
Can you make some example? How can I distinguish between talking to Outlook and PowerPoint?
Yeah, exactly. For example, today my company has already an application that was developed, but we want to integrate some sources from Office 365. So, for example, today I want to integrate OneDrive and managing OneDrive files in my applications, in our enterprise applications. So I can use Microsoft Graph API to integrate those features inside my application directly. So I make calls to OneDrive using Microsoft Graph API to list files in OneDrive account and modify it, update it, delete it, etc.
So if I would like to use Microsoft Teams, the way to go would be by using somehow Graph API. Is that what you're saying? Oh, thank you so much. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
So the next one, Ricardo. You talked about very interesting and confusing things in the beginning of organization, how the real life looks like when working and living with Azure. So what was your session involved?
So I work with organizations that are sometimes in different stages of adoption. Some of them have developers and business units that are leading this adoption, and that makes IT in those organizations sometimes struggle with that.
Big pressure. We know that.
And in the other cases, it's IT that's leading this and setting the rules, and it's finding the correct balance of allowing freedom and allowing business to create new applications and to use these services in a good way and in a secure way and in a way that's compliant and aligned to the laws and the policies that these organizations have to follow. This is something that sometimes needs a lot of work, and it's what we
in your session you pointed out today as a main focus was some resource called Azure Management Group, and I saw that you heavily use this thing to solve many kind of problems. Can you explain that a little bit?
So management groups is a fairly recent feature of Azure. It actually is something that you manage primarily, or you start managing it actually out of Azure AD. You need ownership of Azure AD to start the creation of management groups. And then you use it to create a tree structure where you can assign policy, assign role-based access control, and then organize subscriptions in different points of this tree. And with this capability, you can have differentiated usage of Azure. So you can have a management group for workloads that are in subscriptions that are managed, meaning developers will simply deploy their code there, and there's an operations team that handles this. And you can have a very, very constrained environment. So for example, limiting the regions where you deploy, which services are available, the SKUs of VMs or other options of services that you can control, or for example, enforce encryption on a particular service. So it takes care of the fundamental standards of each service according to company policy. And in other cases, you may have very mature DevOps teams that have or want the full control over what they can do with Azure, and as long as there's an agreement that they can have this as well. So management groups allows an organization to manage this in this difference in a centralized manner and in a controlled manner.
So actually, as I understood, assume I'm building my application and I have some Azure function, and you could set up management group which prevents me of deploying this function in Amsterdam, West Europe, and which might prevent me to use consumption plan. So I can only use premium or something like that. or vice versa?
I'm not sure about the particular example. So Azure.
This is exactly one.
Yeah. Azure policy works. So Azure policy is one of the things that you can target through management groups. So you can define policy, but the coverage of policy is also something that is ongoing. So not all properties of all resources are currently supported. You have something which is a policy alias, and those are the properties that you can target and evaluate using Azure policy. So for something like this, if it's exposed through policy aliases, then it would be possible to control the values that are acceptable or auditable by Azure policy. And then what the management group structure does is centralize the visibility and the configuration of this in a single file.
Okay, so it sounds interesting. Now the question, why we cannot use Microsoft Graph to management groups?
Yeah. But
Good question. What do you think about that?
This is administration of the subscriptions. It's not in the same management effect. So blueprints, etc. It's managing what we can provision, but Microsoft Graph is to manage users that are already using some services inside Azure Active Directory and provisioning applications. Not services.
It's okay, I understand. I'm not just trying to set up a small provocation.
Management groups are targeted by RBAC, and who can do what in management groups is also a function of Azure RBAC. So if
it's different endpoints, different subs.
Membership of a group would control access to a particular group that can have access or not, and this is a combination of Azure AD and what's configured.
So, but following that idea, I would expect that the using of RBAC management groups, I can say in one drive that the user cannot write on the file, but this will not be possible problem.
I can say the users in this group can't create some files in OneDrive, and the same group is used by.
That sounds good. Yeah, that's good. Great. So
there is a link somewhere. It depends.
The Azure story is growing up together. That's good. I like. Boris, you talked today about Azure Functions, and we discussed. We wanted to do it a little bit more advanced, and you talked about a few interesting things. As I remember, I just tried to recap. We talked about different hosting things. Different hosting environments and possibilities. We talked about bindings and triggers, which might be a similar thing. And I would like to know hosting. What does it mean? What options in the hosting do we have today?
Well, basically you have these 4 options, and I guess there is this one option that everyone knows. It's the consumption plan. It's some people say the real serverless plan, because it scales automatically for you and you don't have to manage that anything. But there are limitations on the consumption plan, like the memory 1.5 gig and 1 CPU, and you might reach this limit, or your function execution time.
What is the default right now? Function execution
is 5 minutes by default. You can configure it up to 10 minutes, but after that you're functioning.
But how that works with durable functions, which might take 2 weeks?
Yeah, well, they actually do not take 2 weeks because they pause. So usually in durable functions, you await something, and in this phase where the function is awaiting for something, your function is actually stopped, and it's logged somewhere to which state your function was at this point, and it will restart or restore when the awaited event happens. So your function is actually not running 2 weeks and waiting for it, so it's just waiting for a second actually.
It's run, do something a little bit, somewhere it's message written in service bus queue, and the function is.
And don't get confused, because when you await something using the C# await
inside of the durable function,
inside normal functions, your function is still running. So in normal Azure functions, when you await something, your function is running and you're getting paid for it, or you need to pay for this, you're not getting paid. Great. You have to pay for this. While in Azure durable functions, the function is paused, frozen.
When you run in a late of
Yeah.
some activity, a task,
Yeah, you're right.
then you are postponed and you are not paying for late.
Yes.
So there's different
Right.
for paying out of this. This was a topic of confusion. It is for many developers, which is hopefully clarified. For example, scale control. What's that?
Scale control is a component that is that runs in Azure, that comes with the Azure Functions hosting runtime. So, and the scale controller monitors all events and triggers that trigger your application. And so it knows, it actually starts your application, and it knows the utilization of your application to spin up more instances of your application. And then it also shuts down your applications. When no event comes in, it also shuts down your application.
This is also interesting. It's not very easy to do, to implement something like that.
Yeah, right.
So for example, to clarify, let's make some example. You have a blob storage, and we have a blob storage. Some applications writing the file, uploading file in blob storage. And now in blob storage you can have thousands of files waiting for your function to use the binding to read these files and to write some hello world somewhere. It's nothing special. So, and when thinking about scale in this context of scale controller, how can I control, or how scale controller gets control, how many of instances of my function will be started if I have, let's say, 1 million files?
So it's not really clear, so it's not very documented very well and open publicly, because it's in a closed source part of the function. But from what you can see in the documentation or from tweets and other sources is that there is some logic and algorithms that are running in the scale controller, and there are different algorithms for different triggers.
Different binding, different triggers.
Where they calculate if this is usually a trigger that only runs 2 milliseconds, or this is a trigger that runs 100 milliseconds, and based on these things, it can scale and knows when to scale. So it's not openly. So
by the way, you say a magic word, trigger. Huh? The trigger is something what is implemented inside of Azure function, which activates the function.
Yeah.
And there is a set of supported triggers. Yeah. Can you maybe name some of them?
Yeah, we have, I guess the most known trigger is the HTTP trigger. That triggers your function based on an HTTP request. But we also have queue triggers. We have blob triggers, blob storage triggers. So when a file
service-based event,
so when things change in the blob storage.
So, and now let's say we showed today it was a telnet. It was telnet, yeah. So there is no such trigger, yeah. Oh. So they did some experiment, and so what is the problem?
Actually, yeah. So creating custom triggers, it's technically possible, but it's not supported, and it does not work well with the scale controller, since the scale controller does not know about
because it doesn't see it.
Yeah, it doesn't know about it.
Yeah.
So it cannot monitor events. It cannot scale up or scale down. It might also just kill your application while this trigger is running right now, because it does not know it.
But if you would use your premium hosting model,
no,
you are free to do that.
No. You should.
There's a third one.
There's actually a fourth one. When you run your function in Docker, you can do it, because you own the environment, and you're also responsible for scaling at this point.
Great. Okay. Thank you. This is a complicated topic. We could spend days talking about that. But it's important to rename it. Yeah. Indraneel, last but not least, the topic. We both had 2 machine learning sessions. You did machine learning studio.
Yeah.
I was talking about machine learning.net. And tell me something about your example, what you did today.
So I took, so this was basically a introductory session for Machine Learning Studio, Azure Machine Learning Studio, and how you can build experiments inside it for different machine learning use cases. I took a use case as an example for predictive maintenance. So in big manufacturing companies or factories where you have these scheduled maintenances, how you can make them more smarter using machine learning, using predictive maintenance, and that was the main topic for my use case of this talk.
Okay, and can you tell me how that works? What kind of data did you have? You talked about some components of different machines. One machine consists of different components.
Yeah. So it really depends from the use case to use case, but majorly you have some telemetry data which comes from different components of the machine, as well as the error logs which are non-failure. So the machine is not failed, but you have some kind of error from time to time. Plus the failure logs when the component fails and you have to replace the component. All this data you basically take as the input data, but this is huge data and you need to do some kind of feature engineering on this data. You need to basically make it readable for the machine, make it usable for the machine, and that's why the feature engineering part of this whole experiment is quite important as well. So how to do the feature engineering in Azure Machine Learning Studio using R, using Python, using the pre-existing.
Okay, what
modules.
kind of feature did you use at the end after machine learning?
So for me, my features were failures. So when the machine fails on certain time stamps, as well as the telemetry data of voltage, temperature, rotations, and so on.
Okay, and when the machine fails, what does it mean?
So when
component or machine?
So there is a difference. One is failing the component, another one is failing the machine. Your component failing doesn't necessarily mean your machine might also fail, but when a machine stops, because of which component the machine is stopping, and that's where the predictive maintenance comes in the picture. Which component will have a fatal error that might stop the machine before next maintenance cycle comes, and so that you can replace it just in time instead of either waiting for the scheduled maintenance cycle or just replacing it too early.
But this sounds pretty complicated.
It is in a sense, but that's also the beauty of Machine Learning Studio, because the modular architecture of Machine Learning Studio, you can use multiple pre-existing modules that Machine Learning Studio Marketplace already gives you.
Which did you use?
For example, I used for data cleaning a couple of modules from the Machine Learning Studio, as well as I used the training module directly.
And which training module?
So I trained it on two different training modules. One was regression, another one was multi-class neural networks. And I just wanted to test what gives the better result.
What was the multi-classes? Is it binary class?
It was binary class.
So it
was two class.
Yeah. Okay. So good. It's pretty complex things. We cannot talk about it. So guys, thank you so much. Do you have something more to say to audience?
Thank you, Damir and Indraneel, for setting this
thank
up.
you for coming. You're welcome, and hope to see you soon in some dedicated Azure meetup sessions.
Sure.
Feel invited. Let me know when you have a time and when you're in the city, especially you, and we can organize something. And maybe we go everybody to Paris.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome.